welcome to another exciting episode of the Collaborative Canvas. I'm your host, Ankesh Saxena, and today we have a truly special guest who brings a unique blend of journalism and storytelling to the world of personal branding. Join us in this incredibly talented Ornella Antar, a Lebanese storyteller, writer, and a journalist now based in Los Angeles, California. With over 12 years of experience as an on the ground journalist, Ornella has a deep passion for uncovering and sharing the human stories behind the headlines. Recently, she launched her own business focusing on helping founders and business owners build their personal brands through the powerful medium of storytelling. Ornella's approach is refreshingly innovative, as she introduced what she calls PBSD, or personal branding as self development. This concept not only helps individuals craft their public personas, but also encourages them to grow and evolve through the process. In both her career as a journalist and her current work as a professional storyteller, Ornella's mission has always been clear: to write about people. She firmly believes the professional is personal, and she's here to prove it, helping business owners embrace this philosophy to create authentic and impactful personal brands. In today's episode, we'll explore Ornella's journey, her insight into personal branding, and how storyteller telling can transform the way we present ourselves professionally. Whether you're an entrepreneur looking to define your brand or simply interested in the art of storytelling, the conversation is bound to offer value, a lot of value, and a valuable perspective. So, without further ado, let's dive into this fascinating world of personal branding and storytelling with Ornella Antar. Welcome to the show, Ornella.
Thank you, Ankesh. Thank you so much for the beautiful introduction, and thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be speaking today on the Collaborative Canvas, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
And without saying that, I just started reading about your articles. I'm greatly admiring your work and very big fan of the PBSD concept. I firmly believe that, personal branding truly shines through self-development. And I can't think of anyone better than you to explain this to my audience. So let's dive into a few of the questions that I got inspired by two of your posts, which I mentioned it to you. How do you define personal branding, and why do you believe storytelling is very essential for self-development in this context?
Well, your question has three of my favorite things to talk about, which are storytelling, self-development, and personal branding. To begin by defining personal branding, I actually think it's a very simple concept. It's how you choose to present yourself to the world, and in particular to the professional or to the business world. So I believe that we all choose every day to present ourselves in a certain way, whether it's in our personal lives or it's in our professional lives. And I believe also there is a certain amount of selection that goes through the process. So what you choose to share with your colleagues, how you choose to take yourself to work every morning, how you choose to show up for your friends, for your family, is actually very different, while being the same, because we are at the end of the day the same person with different aspects, with different qualities, with different attitudes, with different facets of our personality. So personal branding is when you put yourself out there, you stop living in the shadows and you stop hiding, and you decide that you will show up as your most original self. And you go through the process of selecting what that is, making sense of who you are. And this is where the process of storytelling comes along, because in my approach to personal branding, storytelling is foundational. You have to make sense of who you are. You have to make sense of your story, of the story of your life. What are the events, the moments, the emotions that have shaped you into who you are today up until this moment? When you have a great understanding of how everything in your life comes together, how things have made you into who you are, what's the common thread between all of the things that you have experienced, whether on a professional or on a personal level, what ties them together in a way that you are who you are today? So what I invite usually my audience and my clients to do is to make sense of their story, because there's something interesting. that I like to shed light on. You know, there's always this question that comes along in interviews, especially when you're interviewing a celebrity or someone who had this tremendous, very exciting, very interesting life. The interviewer always says, tell me the story of your life. If you notice, no one ever asks someone, tell me your life. That's just impossible. No one can tell their life, but we can tell the story of our life. I can tell the story of my professional career. I can tell the story of my personal life. This very nuanced difference between your life and the story of your life is that you can actively choose how to present your story of your life. You can choose to reauthor it at any given moment. I myself take some time every once in a while to look back at my past experiences and choose to lay what I call cold eyes on the past. So what I thought about what happened to me when I was 9 is not the same thing it's not the same way that I see it when I was younger. And probably if I look at the same event 2 years later, I'm going to see it differently. So this is where the dimension of self-development comes from. It's the ability to have control over your narrative, to have control over your story, to decide what is the threat, what is the pattern, how you choose to rearrange the events of your life at every moment, every pivotal moment of your career.
Yeah, and as you were speaking, I was actually recognizing or probably remembering a couple of things going back in my past that everybody has a story, and it's, you rightly said, it's not that easy to tell a story or go write a script on your, that script is already written. Our scripts have already been written. Now when we go into the past and realize what we have done, what learnings we have gained from it, it is probably just the narrative, of course, but at the same time the articulation as well, because it is a storytelling and you're developing yourself through the learnings of those stories. I can give you my own personal, story, but that's going to take a lot of time. You have been dealing with a lot of clients. Is there, or probably you can, if you can share something very powerful kind of a story that helped shaped your personal brand and contributed to your growth?
Well, yes, I actually can think of one powerful story, and this is the story of how I let myself and how I allowed myself to actually build this business. Because and I use this word, this verb, allowed myself, very intentionally, because I believe that I did not allow myself to do a lot of things in the past. So I started working as a journalist when I was 17, so a year before I graduated from high school, which is really early. And I thought, I honestly don't know where this idea came from, that I should just do only one thing, or else I'm not going to be a serious journalist. I didn't allow myself to try anything else. I used to take singing lessons, which I stopped. I used to learn music, which I also stopped. And I had a lot of interests in these 12 years that I did not allow myself to explore deeper. And then when I left my home country, Lebanon, and traveled to move to France, I think I was forced a little bit to kind of assess and reassess things, and I had the time to think of my next move. And I knew I wanted to work within branding, but I also did not really let myself fully embrace this and fully venture into this new field that is not exactly what I used to do as a journalist, until I was like thinking about whether I should do that. Should I work with brands? Should I not work with brands? Will this be something that will make me happy? Will this be something that will fulfill a, a purpose that I have? And so one day I walked into my favorite library in Toulouse, the city I used to live in. And for the very first time, I was not looking to buy books. I was actually looking to charge my phone, because all the coffee shops around the bookstore were closed because they closed really early in France. And I went there not looking to buy books, just looking to ask someone for a charger. And it was there. I saw a book by one of my favorite French authors. She's an icon. She's called Colette, classical woman of letters. And I never even knew she had that book. It was titled The Second Job of a Writer. It was in French, Le Second Métier de l'écrivain. And I was like, oh, so writers have the right to have a second job. So I can allow myself to like venture into marketing and branding and personal branding. And I bought this book immediately. And when I went back home, I realized that my favorite author had worked with a lot of brands. And she was a very acclaimed writer back then, and she still is one of the most prominent French writers, specifically women. And she worked for brands like Perrier, for example. She even opened her own makeup line at some point, and she had a physical store in Paris, which she had written on the wall behind her, "Are you with or against writers having a second job?" And I think this is when I thought to myself, okay, so Colette can do it. Why can't I do it? And then I asked myself an even deeper question. Why am I even waiting for Colette's approval to do what I want to do or to even try what I want to try? And so I said to myself, okay, I don't know if I like this, but I'm gonna try and I'm gonna go full in and I'm gonna allow myself become anything that I want as long as I can do it and I can do it well.
Try
So
and
yeah.
let me get in. That's I think the motto behind what you've become today. And I completely appreciate, the fact that, anybody who does that, who can think of, let me give a try. Even if I fail, let me give a try. I think that's a very powerful story. In fact, something that can boost your morale to do what you actually want. And I have a similar story. I mean, as you were speaking, I probably am, intentionally or by somehow I'm going back in my days that I wanted to play cricket. I wanted to, play music. I did everything, but then at the end of the day, I joined market research industry, and then ever since then, I've been into that market research industry. I was, auditioned for an RJ back then, and then again I left it, and then I thought, it's okay. Well, I think this is what the path it is. But there is always a time when life comes back and tells you, at least give a try. Let's do it again. And I think that's where I am. I'm talking to a lot of people and can easily relate my life stories with them. But when it comes to storytelling and journalism, I think you have a culmination of some of the greatest industries in the world. I mean, storytelling is it's a very powerful industry for me because creating a narrative and telling people what it is, and then they can learn out of it. It's a huge task, and you really have to be very particular about what you're actually telling them, because everybody has a bad and good effect in their life, so you cannot just keep on telling everything like that. um some of the key elements of storytelling that individuals should focus to effectively build and communicate their personal brand, what could be those?
Well, I believe the most important thing for someone to start doing and implementing in the process of them building their personal brand is to get active in storytelling first, because while it's very important that you understand what your personality is, how you choose to show up to your audience or your colleagues, your values, to have an understanding of your values and your mission and so on. It's very important that you communicate all of that in stories, because nobody wants values and I don't know, like personality traits just, listed in a series of bullet points. It just sounds very mechanical and less human and less relatable. What I advise people to do is to tell personal stories and not just any storytelling. And I would like to make a very important note here is that personal does not have to be private. Just because you tell a personal story, it does not mean that you have to tell private stories. Now, what is a personal story? What is a private story? It's up to every one of us to decide where to draw the line. It's very subjective. What I choose to tell about myself maybe is something that is so private to someone else that they wouldn't feel comfortable sharing with an audience or on social media or during a networking event. That's okay. But telling a personal story means telling a story that you have experienced, something only you can have, something only you can tell. And what even sounds even more paradoxical, and it's not, is that the more personal your story is, the more detailed it is, the more relatable it sounds to your audience. So I might tell you that I used to live in Lebanon and then I moved to France and Toulouse, and I had to take some time off from work because I immigrated, and I had to start reassessing and re-examining everything that I've been doing and think about my next steps. So the first thing I would advise usually my clients and my audience to do while building their personal brand is to focus on storytelling, because the one thing you need to really connect with your audience, build a bond with your audience, is to tell stories that others can relate to. And paradoxically, I know it sounds paradoxical, but it's not, but the most personal stories are the most relatable stories, are the most universal stories. And I'm going to give an example because I know this sounds a little bit paradoxical and counterintuitive, but it's not. So if I choose to tell you the story of how I went to law school for 3 years, studied, did everything I could to succeed. And then one day I go to law school because I have a class at 8. I'm late because, of course, I didn't want to go and I hesitated so much. I was like, I'll skip the class, I'll not skip the class. And I arrived to university at 8:05. The door was closed, but I knew that if I just knock a little bit and just enter, no one is going to tell me anything because it's okay. I just stood in front of the door and I didn't knock. I just didn't want to go there. I didn't. And I remember that this was the last time I went to law school. I went back home, took another cab, and the moment I arrived back home, my roommates were like, what happened? You just went. And I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to law school anymore. I am going to enroll in a BA in French literature, because I have been spending all the time in the classes of law school reading fiction authors that I love, and I'm no longer tolerating this. So when I tell this story, and I can see already on your face that it's something that human beings can relate to, have everyone in my audience been to law school and then stopped to study literature? No. But have everyone in my audience chose to do something that they really love after having chosen something else? Yes. Sometimes it's work, sometimes it's a partner, sometimes it's how they choose to run their lives. So when I tell the story in details, what happened with me in front of the door, how I chose not to knock, of course, this is the story that only happened to me. And this is something very personal because I was in Beirut and you weren't. I was in law school and you weren't. I went to study literature and you weren't. But there's a universal truth in my story, which is choosing, getting the right to choose what you want to do. And this in particular is what makes my personal story relatable to so many people out there, even if they haven't been exactly in my shoes.
And somehow, even your story that, you went to a law school and you just hold yourself back, somewhere down the line, it is relatable to me as well. And I'm sure, I mean, you mentioned it correctly, a lot of cases where when you're talking to your audiences, they probably could be able to relate that as well. And part of these conversations that I generally have with my clients, with my speakers, and with my guest on the podcast, there's so many things that I personally relate to, and I'm sure the guest would also be able to relate that what to what extent they went to get that job, and then why they leave it, and whether they have actually opted for not. A lot takes, I think, a courage to build that one, and somewhere it is your unique identity overall which speaks about your personal brand, and foster that self development. I still wanted to understand, how can someone can identify that. It's not that easy. I mean, I even struggle sometimes, but if you can shed some light that how can someone can identify and leverage that unique storytelling process while building upon that personal brand and foster that self development.
That's an interesting question. I think that one of the most efficient and easily applicable and doable things to do to try is to give some time to sit down on your own, just have some quiet time and lay down all the stories, not the stories actually, lay down all the moments, the events, the emotions, the pivotal turning points in your life that you think were important. So at first, you're gonna go through remembering just the big things. When you graduated from school and then went into law school and then dropped out of law school to study literature, and when you got your first job as a full-time journalist, you're gonna have the really big events lined up in front of you. The more frequently you do this exercise, the more you'll realize that there are events that are not that big or moments that are not that pivotal that also have shaped who you are. They're not like some big transformational moments in your life, but they are as important. And the more you dig deeper into yourself, the more you'll get out of these stories. It's an interesting journey back to the past. And once every time you have just a couple of events or memories or turning points in your life, like written down in front of you on a canvas, what you can do is take a look at these events and ask yourself this question: how do these events relate to each other? Because this is the interesting and the intriguing part. My clients don't come to me because they want to remember if they went to law school or to engineering. They know their stories. They know when they were, they know what they did last summer, they know how their job went, and what they don't really know or have some trouble getting to make sense of is, how does all of these parts relate to each other? What's the thread that ties all of these events and all of these emotions, all of these pivotal moments? What's the link? How can I bring them all? What happened first? Like, did I go to law school because I was, I don't know, influenced by something? Or did I leave it because I was influenced by something? What happened first? Not chronologically, because of course, chronologically, you know what happened in what year, and you can tell, oh, okay, of course, this happened then because it was in 2021, and then before that, it was in 2019. Of course, these are all the things you know, but trying to understand what made you make this move, what made you go from here to there, from here to there, is the difficult part, and the part where I think individuals building their personal brand should spend more time on this task. Because once you can make sense of the things that happen to you, you can make anything happen for you.
Yeah.
And I know that the entrepreneurship world is very like future focused, and everything is future forward, and don't look at the past, start looking to your future, build your future, of course. But it's not like the past, the present, and the future are not separate entities. Time is one. So once you realize this, the best way to start building your future is to spend just a little bit of time thinking of how you got to where you are today, the good and the bad
Yeah,
and the
that's so
ugly.
beautifully articulated. I mean, I think authenticity is the best part of it. But again, you mentioned it very rightly. It is about understanding who you were and what you have become and what learnings you have taken it out of it. And that m- being authentic is how you played it. One of your, I remember the line that we mentioned. Let me pull up here. The the professional is personal. That's how it articulated the entire thing. So one quick question that comes to my mind, we all have a genuine story. We all resonate with those genuine stories with others, and sometimes there's probably a here and there it's a little different with each other. But what role does overall that authenticity play in storytelling for personal branding, and how someone can actually ensure that they're resonating well. If I really have to tell my client that this is what it is good for you, by my experience, what should be the best way of doing it?
Yes, so I'm not a big fan of the word authenticity when it's used as a trend in the field of personal branding, because I believe it puts a lot of pressure on those building their personal brands, because they think it makes them think that they have to tell everything to everyone all the time, which is not true. We have the right to select what to share with anyone we meet. And I just find it unreasonable for us to be asking of people to tell everything about themselves to someone they have just met online or someone they have just met on in a networking event. So what I usually suggest and advise my clients and my audience to do is to show up as their most original self. Just be who you are in a way that is different from anyone else, because who you are is already different from anyone else. And not just stick to who you want to be, but also who you want to become. And this is, in a nutshell, PBSD, personal branding as self-development. I believe that your personal brand should be one step ahead of you, not two steps, because that would be just fake. You'd be showing up as someone who you are not or who you are not yet. But if you just choose to have your personal brand be one step ahead of you, because every time a client comes to me and they tell me, I would like to become bolder, or my client yesterday told me that they want to be perceived as mature and elegant. And you know what's the most interesting thing about that is they already are. They already are bold. They already are mature and elegant. They just need to start showing up as the bold person that they already are, the mature and elegant person that they already are. And I believe leveraging your personal brand to help you become who you want to be is is priceless, and is a really big opportunity for self-development, because at the end you become who you already are.
Beautiful. And I think I can change my motto to be more authentic, to be more original. I think not saying that it should be authentic, but as you rightly mentioned in one of the contexts, that let's not talk about all the 100% of the stories. Talk about 20% of them. Let's be authentic there, but be original there. And that's how I think a lot of things would safe and will be safe when it comes to dealing with the client. And specifically, I think this is my journey within sales management has been by far the large or long, I probably say, because I spent almost like 11 plus years into the sales environment. And I realized that that personal branding would eventually work when you're genuine, you're original, you're talking about what it is, not by just uh, fuming up things which are not required, and telling the client which is not right. So yeah, I mean, I think when you're genuine, you're original, they'll come to you. You don't even have to worry about it. But again, it is a process. And I love this conversation because I got tons of questions that I can ask Ornella, to be honest, about personal branding, and she would not stop answering those. I love the conversation that we have. And this is like amazing. I mean, again, personal branding, when you talk about it, it doesn't end anywhere. But Thank you so much for, coming on to the show, Ornella. This is really a great conversation by far that I had. And ladies and gentlemen, as we wrap this up enlightening episode, I wanted to extend my heartfelt thank you to Ornella Antar for sharing her incredible insights into the personal branding and storytelling. It has been fascinating to learn about her journey from journalism to helping business owners craft authentic and impactful personal brand through her innovative approach, PBSD. Ornella, your belief that professional is personal has truly resonated and reminding us all the power of genuine storytelling and building connections and trust. For our listeners, if you're looking to redefine your personal brands or simply wanting to learn more about how storytelling can transform your personal presence, be sure to follow Ornella's work and connect with her. Thank you all for tuning into the collaborative canvas, and thank you, Ornella, for joining us on this show and telling about your experiences. And we hope that people have enjoyed this discussion and they found it as inspiring as I did. Remember to subscribe our podcast for more amazing episodes featuring amazing guests and insightful conversation. Until next time, keep telling your story and embracing the personal side of the professional. Goodbye.